It's not an exaggeration to say that Tom Savini is a legend. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. It's my favorite month of the year. That's right, October. Horror films are everywhere. And I am so fortunate today to talk to a horror legend. There is a new documentary that's out today about Tom Savini. Smoke and Mirrors, the story of Tom Savini, opened my eyes to this legend who I grew up as a kid reading Fangoria magazine. He first sort of came to mind to me when I saw Dawn of the Dead, the original Dawn of the Dead by George Romero, not just because of his work behind the camera, but also because of his work in front of the camera. He's the guy in the motorcycle gang doing stunts, running around. You've seen him in so many movies. He's here today. Let me just bring him on the podcast along with the director, Jason Baker. Tom, welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for making this wonderful film.
Wait a minute. Speaking of legends, you're Chris Gore.
Well, well, true. Some people know who I am. Yes, thank Tom. Hearing that come from you is embarrassing for me.
I'm sorry.
But that's okay. But look, I mean, obviously I followed your work for years. This documentary really opened my eyes. And not only that, I was on the set. You directed me in the remake of Night of the Living Dead. I was on the set for 2 weeks. I slept on the couch, John Vulich's couch where he was staying, and Everett Burrell. I slept on their couch. I was a zombie. I went to zombie school. I got the little certificate. And you directed me in a scene where the truck blew up. And
yes.
The zombie that came, I mean, I was just like, it's hard not to be in awe, right?
Well, you were one of the zombies eating what was left of Tom and what's her face? Yeah.
It was chicken and covered with Caro. It was cold chicken with Caro syrup and I mean, it was. Hey, we dug right into it. We didn't care.
Oh, good.
But everything I learned from this doc, like your personal life, what your early life. I mean, how you experienced film and your experiences, in the army, informed everything. Can you tell me what's it like now to see all of this? I mean, it's really an epic documentary because it spans decades. There's footage and stories I never knew about your life. How did this all come together?
Well, Jason was a student at my school, and then he was a student at the George Romero film program. We worked on a film together, and from what I understand, I've heard him say this, he decided then and there that he wanted to do something to show my personal stuff. The last interviewer asked if I was self-conscious about wanting a documentary about, my stuff, but this thing is, you're right, this thing is pretty encapsulating. It's pretty well covers everything. The first sentence in my book that I wrote, Grand Illusions, is the more you do, the more you get to do. It's advice for people who want to work in movies. The more skills you have, the more likely you're going to get in the door, okay? Mm-hmm. And here's Jason, film school, directing school, wanting to do a documentary on me. Yeah, I totally went for it. And you can tell, this thing took 7 years to make. My hair is long, my hair is short, and about
you're a hard man to track down.
Yeah, and on the personal side, I showed it in Montreal at a film festival, and I got up afterwards and apologized to the crowd about all the personal stuff, and they said, no, that's what we want. So then he concentrated on putting a lot of personal stuff in, but satisfying the audience with movie stuff, because his logic was they already know me as far as movies and Fangoria magazine, but he wanted to concentrate on the personal stuff. And to his credit, every time somebody sees it, they say it has a lot of heart.
It absolutely has a lot of heart. And I mean, just hearing your early story and what you went through is incredible. The story of reuniting with your daughter who was given up for adoption is
right.
Crazy. And that she was a fan of yours and didn't realize you were her dad. It's
and she's so much fun to be with. We love hanging out with her. She's hilarious.
Well, I mean, the movie, it's unbelievable that the movie's just 90 minutes because there's so much that happens in it. Were there stories that you had to leave out that you regret, or things that like
not that I regret? No, there was stuff that we left out. I mean, at one point, Jason, we went to my old studio, which is now a Chinese furniture shop, and we looked around, and that I didn't see that was, and he didn't see that we needed that. And that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing is to cut stuff that you find interesting, but you have to decide on a time limit, and what's better than this? What can we keep in that's better than this? But he made all the right decisions, I think.
Yeah, Jason, was that challenging for you to just like encapsulate so much of Tom's history, but also like track like his career, which spans, decades? I mean, and so many prominent movies that to today we look on as classics. I mean, they are classics.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the big challenges. One of the original things, back to what Tom was saying, was when we did the short film, was we shot all night. It was night shoots, and Tom and I were the only two people that couldn't fall asleep right away. So we'd end up kind of just hanging out, talking till about noon. And Tom
actually, he caught me rifling through his luggage.
Yeah,
because I was looking for contact lens solution.
Yeah,
and then it became
it's not every day you wake up and Tom's just going through your stuff in the middle of the night, and I'm like, okay. So no, he's looking through the makeup kit. But no, so what happened was, Tom and I would stay up, and he just told me these amazing stories, and it just inspired me and intrigued me, and just finding out everything he's been through, and just everything from growing up here in Pittsburgh and working and everything, and then being a single father. And, to me, that was really inspiring, is that there's, I always say this, no disrespect to single mothers, but there's not a lot of single father stories. And that to me was really, really intriguing. So I really wanted to stay more with that, because again, with DVDs and Blu-rays, there's so much supplemental material and everything like that. And I felt like if we were just going to go, if we were going to donate 30 minutes to Dawn of the Dead again, I felt like we would just be treading familiar ground, or you could always get that. And I'm like, well, what was, Tom, what were you going through when you were doing Dawn of the Dead? I've seen what you guys did on set, but what was it like, what was going on in your personal life? And that's, the big thing was, I don't even think we mentioned it in the documentary, Tom, was that here's Tom making one of the most iconic horror movies in cinema history, and all he cares about is getting off work to come home and work on his Darth Vader Halloween costume. And it's like, to me, that's the stuff that I love. I'm like, if you look, Tom's got these great photos, and I'm so sad that didn't make it into the documentary. Now I look at that and I'm like, I think we missed an iconic moment with Tom making his own Darth Vader costume in 1979, before Don Post, before everybody.
We didn't talk about that in the doc?
No, it never made it in there. I think it was just one of the things that we ended up talking about, and it just kind of ended up on the cutting room floor.
It's in the new book.
Yeah.
I know that we did. It's in the new book. Yeah.
But so it was just stuff like that I was way more intrigued with, that I was like, again, I feel like Tom's career has been very heavily archived with DVDs, supplemental materials, and everything like that. But the man himself hasn't really been covered. So that was sort of our angle in the aspect we wanted to go with.
Also, we're sitting around and we're talking about magic. And I thought, well, let's show them some magic. So I took him up to the third floor and put a box on his head and drove daggers through it. And we shot that in fast motion. And it's in the doc, just I showed you a magic trick like that.
Well,
but that's what it's like hanging out with Tom. You hang out with, and I'm sure Greg, Howard, John, anybody can testament to this, is that you hang out with Tom long enough, he's going to either catch you on fire or pull a magic trick or do something kind of wacky and zany.
Cast your head. Yeah.
Yeah. That's half the fun of being friends with Tom.
Well,
so every day is a new adventure with him.
I was going to say, one of the great things about the doc was Tom's ability to problem solve in terms of practical effects. I think today certain horror films get too caught up in, well, we can do that digital, we can do it digital. And after a while, there's just sort of a disconnect. I think the audience, whether they recognize it or not, it just doesn't feel as real or impactful. with a simple effect that you came up with. I mean, one of the ones that comes to mind is in Dawn of the Dead with the screwdriver, right? The screwdriver to the zombie's head, which was such a simple problem of a straw that was painted silver into a screwdriver handle. Like, I love that kind of problem solving that it showed that you were capable of accomplishing. And I think that, I don't know, I just admire that so much. And I think that some of that has been lost in modern horror, like not just the way to achieve those effects, but even coming up with the creative kills, right?
Well, it's what I tell my students on the first day of class at the orientation. It's the mindset about special makeup effects. And that is, what do I need to see to make me believe that what I'm seeing is really happening? And then that translates to, what do I need to show an audience to make them believe what they're seeing is really happening? And then create the pieces. I needed to see a screwdriver, so I had to make a contracting one. Blood has to come out. So that's why the silver straw with holes in it. But that's the fun. The fun is solving these problems. I mean, my crews will tell you that one of the phrases that they constantly make fun of is, what if you were in the middle of the desert and didn't have super glue? Now you got to figure out something else. Okay, so they're constantly throwing that in my face.
Yeah, but
what if you're in the middle of the desert and didn't have tacos? Or
Right.
But Howard Berger talks about it as well in documentary, where he's like, they talk about the machete in the head from Dawn. And he's like, yeah, and that's the thing, is we think about that all the time at their shop, and we do it at our shop as well. It's like, oh, we're gonna have to do this, and recast and remold, and then we're gonna do a clay press and this and that. And you're like, wait, let's just cut a wedge out of it and shoot it in reverse.
Yeah, so Howard said, he said somebody else would have thought of making a casting a head and making a fake head. No, you use the real actor, but a fake machete, and that's, I always like to have the real actor because they can react during the thing. A fake head, you look at it longer than 3 seconds, it's a fake head,
Right.
Except for Kevin Yeager's heads in Sleepy Hollow. Those were brilliant. You could stare at those all day,
What are some of the other things that you tell your students? Because I feel you came up in an era of filmmaking where you didn't have the kind of tools that people have available today. And I think that some of these things are being lost, like that machete trick, right? Like that, you just run it in reverse. It's so effective. I remember seeing it for the first time. Yeah. I mean, it blows my mind how effective that is. But what are some of the other things you tell your students?
It's just logic, Well, the other things I tell them, let's see. I just had orientation a couple of days ago where I told them all this stuff. The more you do, the more you get to do. That's important. The mindset. Also, one of the guys asked me about being a combat photographer in Vietnam and how that affected, and that had a huge effect on my effects work because my effects are realistic. They're anatomically correct. I hate in movies when an actor is going to play a dead body and he closes his mouth and tries to look pretty for the camera when none of your muscles work, including your jaw muscles.
Yeah.
The jaw should be slack. When you're dead, the jaw is slack. I see that mistake so often in movies with actors, trying to pretend they're a dead body. Also, the crime scene, if somebody has red blood on them, the next day that blood would be dark brown, burnt sienna. They go to crime scenes the next day and the blood is red. That's a huge mistake. But I'm like the only makeup artist that has seen the real stuff in a combat zone, with cadaver after cadaver. So I have an advantage, and I try to pass that on to them, But also the idea that these are magic tricks. The name of my book is Grand Illusions, my special makeup effects book, because I think of them as magic tricks. Which is where the mindset comes from. What do I need to see? A magician does that. A magician, fools you with misdirection and mechanical devices you're not aware of. We do the same thing.
Well, also, what I love about the film is that it opens explaining who you are. And by that, I mean, like, you're known for your makeup effects as well, but also you're an actor and people forget, a stuntman. I mean, it's crazy. How does it feel like when you have like legends like Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino who are fans of you, and that, oh my God, that audition footage I'm so glad that you dug up like so many rare things. But how does it feel when people like that are a fan of you? And then what's it like to have the ability to have that acting career for so many key roles?
Well, again, the more you do, the more you get to do. My dad could do anything. My dad was a carpenter, a bricklayer, a carpenter, a shoemaker, an electrician. He could do anything. I thought that you're supposed to do many things well. So he was the first influence on me, making me interested in many things. And that's what I try to tell my students. Again, to answer your question, the more you do, you should be able to do many things.
Well, in addition, directing, right? Was it when I mean, obviously you've worked with George Romero, you worked with Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino. Did they give you like just inspiration in that regard, or what did you learn from them, or what was it like?
No, I've always had that. Again, getting back to makeup effects being magic tricks, sometimes you have to teach directors about magic, about how a magic trick works. You have to have this before you can show this, or this is going to be meaningless, as far as a director goes. At one point, it was in my contract that I would direct the scenes that my effects were in, because I need to choose the camera angle to make that retractable screwdriver work. You know what I'm saying? And that's true of so many other effects. A lot of what Corey Feldman did in Friday the 13th Part 4, I had to take charge of that and make sure that the magic trick was going to work, because some directors are not magicians, and don't understand it. But directing has always been a part of what I do. I mean, when I did 8 years of repertory theater, I was directing some of those plays. I just had a knack for it. And that's something else. When my students come in who have never sculpted before, you put a blob of clay in front of them, and suddenly they've given life to something that never existed before, that they didn't know they had in them. So it's kind of nurturing creativity. And that's what I tell them. The joy of creativity is giving life to something that never existed before until you decided to make it exist. You are Dr. Frankenstein pulling the switch on your talent and seeing what rises off the operating table. So, I mean, I'm post answering your question from before about what else do I tell the students,
It seemed that you had a very collaborative relationship with George Romero, and I believe that between the two of you, you've influenced modern horror in so many ways. I mean, there would be no Walking Dead without George Romero and Tom Savini. I fully believe that. So
I do too. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, too. You feel you've left a legacy, not just the films that you've made and participated in, but other filmmakers and storytellers who've taken what you've established and taking it further. I mean, I really do believe that Walking Dead owes a debt to both you and George. Can you?
Well, there's at least 12 things in The Walking Dead that are direct copies of what I've done in the zombie movies. And, to Greg, who's my pal, it's a homage, and I appreciate it, But George will tell you, and I quote him often, that a good director can't think of everything. So he listens to everybody. You don't do everything that they say, but you pick and choose. And I had that same collaboration with Jason on Smoke and Mirrors, But I've always had that collaboration because, on a movie, a good director will tell you that there's the auteur theory, but collaboration is essential, essential. But a director is the general in charge, guiding the troops. So, he gives the orders, but he also, if he's good, listens to everybody, And that's what a collaboration is.
And Jason, speaking of collaboration, this documentary is a collaboration with Tom. And can you tell me more about that experience? I'm just so impressed that it's an archival documentary. It's a like an epic biography. I mean, you spent 7 years making it. what's your whole takeaway from the experience? I'm just impressed. It's 90 minutes. To me,
it's done.
I don't want to.
It's finally
I don't want to speak for Jason, but I'll just throw this in. He's probably going to tell you about sitting in the living room at the coffee table, editing and putting together stuff, and I'll go upstairs and put a couple of blanks in my shotgun and fire them down the steps, and he would fly off the couch onto the floor.
Yeah,
just to keep the juices going, because I love to scare people.
Yeah, good times, good stuff.
Have you gotten to screen the film at festivals?
Oh no, let him answer the question.
Oh, sorry. No, yeah. I don't. Sorry, I was just. You just shell shocked me and brought up the PTSD and getting shot at with blanks. So, what was the question again?
Just like putting together like your whole takeaway from this experience. It's 7 years to put this together. It's I mean, I'm amazed so much was condensed, because I feel like it could have been a series, right? It could have been like there's enough, there that it could have been episodes of a doc series. But what's your whole takeaway from the experience? Because you really collaborated with Tom on this, his involvement in it made it what it is. There's just so much archival that, that blows my mind.
Straight up, it was life-changing. Just right. All of it, all the experience, like having our producer, Rob Lucas, help out, Mitch Cleaver, who helped us shoot, Mike, our other camera guy, just everybody, Aaron Shelton, everybody that helped us work on it and collaborate it together. And like getting to have Tom's now part of my life, and that's a wonderful feeling. And just getting to show respect to Tom and just kind of doing something I felt, I'm like, I don't think Tom gets enough respect for what he's done and brought to many sides of the film, to not just effects, but filmmaking just in general. One of my favorite movies growing up was the remake of Night of the Living Dead, and I didn't even know that Tom directed it. I never read credits. I just was like, show me the monsters. So, but just all of it, and then just having to persevere was kind of a hard thing where, like we'd sit down with Tom and we do like a 2-hour session. We interview him, get some really good stuff. It was almost, we talk about how it was almost like therapy sessions with Tom, where we'd sit down and, the first interviews we did, it was kind of like a puff piece. We talked about this and that and everything. And then the next time we'd sit down and get a little deeper. And then, what would happen, it was really funny. So what would happen is we'd sit down, we'd do these interviews, shoot like 2-hour segments, pack up all of our gear. And then like 45 minutes later, Tom would call me and be like, oh my God, we have to talk about this thing that happened to me when I was a kid, or this thing that happened to me in Vietnam, or this thing that happened to me in college. And I'm like, yeah, that's really important. We totally need to talk about that in the film. I'm like, well, when can we shoot you again, Tom? And he's like, well, I got to go shoot Django. I'll be back in like 3 months. And I was like, all right, well, we'll see you in 3 months. So
that's why it took 7 years.
Yeah. And then it was, and then it was getting people and then hunting down everybody else, like people like Alice Cooper again was like, Alice is like, I have to be a part of this, but I'll be in Pittsburgh in 2 months. So it's like, all right, well, let's wait 2 months and this and that. So, it's one of those things to where, one of the things Tom has always taught me too, is that if you don't have time, you got to spend the money and vice versa. If you don't have money, you got to spend the time. And, it's like, we can't really, a lot of these people, like we didn't have the budget to buy them out of their projects to come and do an interview with us. So whenever it was convenient, they were more than willing to give us 20, 30, an hour of their time, and forever grateful. And it was a fun thing to work on, and just getting to show respect to Tom and just kind of show his life story again. And I'm like, there's not a lot of single father stories. And also there's not a lot of like just living here in Pittsburgh and seeing the way that things are done and the way that films are made, and just that whole fuck it, we'll do it ourselves, guerrilla style filmmaking that Tom and George just did is so inspiring to like this whole group and, thing of filmmakers here, not only in Pittsburgh, but across the country, and people, and it's just seeing how much they've inspired people was sort of just the thing that lit a fire under our ass to make sure we got done.
Well, I will say it was one of the greatest experiences of my life to spend time on that Night of the Living Dead set. I know we're going through so much then, Tom, but I remember it being like camp. I remember there was no sort of like, I remember talking to Patricia Tallman and Tony Todd, and there was no sort of like airs of stardom with them. They hung out and talked to everybody. It was the coolest set. I've been on many other film sets, but it was like summer camp for me, and one of my greatest experiences of my life. So
glad to hear it. Glad to hear it.
And I'll say I'm so glad this movie is made, because it should be required viewing for your students. They need to see this. I know you do.
Oh, which one? Night of the Living Dead or Smoke and Mirrors?
Both. They need to see both, but Smoke and Mirrors for sure to get to know you. But and definitely Night of the Living Dead. It blew my mind to see. One of the great things in this film, the original storyboards, and you kind of walked through what the original ending was intended to be, and all of your intentions were so dead on. Like, I mean, I think the film turned out great, but all these things that you had intended to add, like, it blew my mind. It was awesome.
How do you know about that stuff? Do you have my book?
It's in the documentary.
It's in the doc. I mean, you show the storyboards and walk through the thing with the mirror and Patricia.
Yeah.
Well, I
realize that. I realize that now. But since then, I published a book, Night of the Living Dead, the version you've never seen, which is the storyboards, and I talk at length about what I didn't get to do.
Well, you should get this documentary, your books, and just everything Tom Savini. You're such an inspiration, and truly, sir,
thank you.
It's just an honor to talk to you, Jason. Thank you for your 7 years. Effort well worth it. And the result is fantastic. I know you got to do other interviews, so but thank you for.
Well, don't forget, you're Chris Gore.
Well, I know that, but I'm a super fan, Tom. I mean, I drove to Pittsburgh. I got a case of Iron City beer. I was there for a few weeks. It was just like I say, one of the greatest experiences of my life. So
glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. You bet.
Right. Take care, guys.
Best of luck with this. Yeah, best of luck.
I appreciate it. Thanks again.
You bet.
Bye now.